She thought he'd be the last man to save her, until the monster everyone feared became the only one who knelt for her. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe. The rain felt like punishment, cold, heavy, relentless. Each drop stinging against Amelia's already bruised skin as she stumbled down the empty street. Her breath came in short, fractured bursts, fog spilling from her lips in the frigid midnight air. Her shoes slapped against the pavement, soaked through long ago, her steps uneven from both exhaustion and pain. She didn't remember when she started running, only the door slamming, the roar of a man who told her she was nothing, the flash of a hand, then another, then the sickening thud as her back hit the floor. She had no plan, only instinct. And instinct led her here. Franklin Street was usually a river of nightlife this time of night, but the storm had cleared it like some wrathful hand. The neon signs were dark. The clubs shuttered early. No taxis prowled. No pedestrians crossed. The city felt hollow, abandoned. Except for one building. The Costa Private Club stood glowing like a beacon at the end of the block, its tall windows spilling warm gold light into the rain. Amelia had never stepped foot inside. She wasn't the type of girl who got invited to elite Italian clubs where the wealthy whispered secrets behind velvet curtains. But she'd heard the rumors, the warnings, the whispers spoken in fear. Dante Costa's place. Don't look too long. Don't ask questions. Don't, under any circumstances, get involved. Yet here she was, barreling toward it, toward him, because she couldn't think of anywhere else to go. Anyone else who might help. Not after what happened. Not when she didn't even have her phone, only the bruises on her arms and the terror clawing up her throat. She gripped her ribs and forced her legs to move faster. Pain screamed through her side. "Keep going," she whispered to herself, though her voice cracked on the words. "Just keep." The club gates loomed in front of her, tall, wrought iron, locked. She reached them and pressed her palms against the cold metal, her body shaking violently from the cold, and adrenaline draining out of her in one dizzying rush. "Please," she whispered to no one. "Please, someone, help." Her knees buckled. The ground rushed up to meet her, her hands scraping pavement, her vision blurring as rainwater mixed with the tears she didn't remember letting fall. She tried to lift herself again, but her arms trembled and gave out. Then headlights. Harsh, blinding light cut through the downpour, sweeping over her like a spotlight. A low, expensive engine purred, powerful enough to vibrate the ground beneath her cheek. Instinct told her to run, to hide, to curl into herself and disappear. But her body was done obeying commands. The car stopped inches from her. Doors slammed, fast. Heavy footsteps splashed through puddles, urgent and direct. Someone crouched beside her, a shadow blocking the rain, a presence so strong the air seemed to bend around him. A gloved hand brushed her hair back from her face. "Dio mio," a deep voice murmured, low and sharp with fury, and something else she didn't recognize. Softness, maybe. Shock. "Who did this to you?" Amelia blinked, trying to focus, but the world kept swaying, rain dripping from her lashes. Through the blur she saw him. Dark coat, dark eyes, jaw like carved stone. Dante Costa. She didn't need a picture or a rumor to know. Men like him didn't need introductions. They just existed differently. Commanding. Controlled. Terrifying in a way that felt ancient. She tried to apologize. She didn't know why. Only that years of living in fear had taught her that even asking for help required guilt. "I'm sorry," she breathed, her voice breaking like glass. "I didn't know where to go." His eyes narrowed, and he lifted her chin gently, thumb brushing the edge of a blooming bruise. "You ran to the right place," he said quietly, too quietly. "You're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign, impossible. She let out a trembling breath as darkness pulled her under, the last thing she felt being his arms sliding beneath her, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. And far above the storm, somewhere in the city's shadows, something shifted. because the moment she collapsed into Dante Costa's arms, the night stopped belonging to her abuser. By sunrise, it would belong to Dante. Rain slid off Dante Costa's coat in sheets, but he didn't seem to feel it. All his focus narrowed to the small, trembling form slumped against the side of his black Maserati. The storm raged around them, wind whipping, thunder cracking overhead, and yet the only sound he truly heard was her uneven breathing. She was curled slightly, one arm wrapped protectively across her ribs, the other limp on the pavement. Her clothes clung to her like second skin, soaked and torn. Her chin was tucked down, dark hair plastered to her cheeks, and the bruises, fresh, raw, angry, stood out like fingerprints of cruelty. His jaw locked. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout for answers. Dante simply stood there, the rain pouring off him like nature itself didn't dare touch him, and stared at the girl at his feet. "When did she get here?" he asked quietly. Enzo, his head of security, swallowed hard. Men always did that around Dante, not because he was loud, but because he never needed to be. "Boss, she collapsed the second she reached the gates. We were checking the perimeter when your car came up." Dante knelt beside her without hesitation, the air around him shifting, tightening. Even Enzo took half a step back. Up close, she was shaking uncontrollably, her lips blue from the cold, her breath shallow and fast. He brushed her hair off her face, then stilled. Her cheek, her jaw, the side of her mouth. Someone had hit her. More than once. Something hot and lethal uncoiled in Dante's chest, a feeling he didn't allow himself often. Rage. Not the quick, burning kind. The deep kind. The kind that made men disappear. But when her eyes fluttered weakly, he softened instantly. "Piccola," he murmured, voice dropping to something shockingly gentle. "Look at me." Her lashes trembled. Her eyes opened halfway. And God, she looked terrified. Not of him. Of everything. "I'm sorry," she breathed, words cracking as she fought for air. "I didn't mean to." She apologized for existing, for needing help, for ruining his night, perhaps. Dante's throat tightened with something unexpected. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't ever apologize to me." The storm howled, wind slamming against the iron gates, but the world between them felt impossibly still. She blinked at him, dazed, as if she didn't believe what she'd heard. He slid an arm under her knees, another behind her back. She stiffened, instinctively flinching from touch. Dante froze, not out of fear but precision, before he shifted his hold, slow, measured, giving her space to brace herself. She didn't pull away this time. She simply collapsed into him, her head falling softly against his shoulder. His men stared like they'd just seen a ghost. "Boss?" Enzo asked, voice barely above the rain. "What do you want us to?" "Open the doors," Dante said, already rising with her in his arms. "Now!" Enzo ran ahead, fumbling with the gates like his hands had forgotten how to work. Another guard sprinted to hold an umbrella over Dante, but he didn't bother with it. Rain hammered his hair, slid down his jawline, soaked through his shirt, and he didn't blink. He only tightened his grip around the girl in his arms, careful not to touch her injuries. "She's bleeding," someone murmured behind him, shaking. Dante didn't look back. "I see that." They'd all seen him furious, cold, brutal, merciless. But they'd never seen this, the way his hand slid protectively along her back, the way he bent his head slightly, as if shielding her from the storm itself, the way he held her like she was made of something breakable, precious, the kind of softness they didn't think he possessed. "Bring towels. Call the doctor. Make sure the penthouse is heated," he ordered as he carried her through the gates. Then he paused long enough to look back at his men, eyes dark as a loaded gun. "And find out who touched her." The storm rumbled in answer. Inside Dante's chest, something ancient and violent stirred. Because whoever hurt this girl, whoever left her shaking in the rain, had just signed their own death sentence. Dante Costa never showed gentleness. But the moment he lifted her into his arms, a quiet, devastating truth settled over the men who followed him. The devil didn't kneel for anyone. Until her. Warmth pressed against her skin before she even opened her eyes. Soft blankets, steady heat, the faint scent of cedar and something darker. Not rain, not fear, not the cold bite of pavement. For a moment, Amelia let herself believe she was dreaming. Then pain flickered along her ribs, sharp and insistent. Her eyes shot open. She wasn't in an alley. She wasn't on the street. She wasn't alone. The room around her was impossibly quiet and impossibly beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows that showed a city drowned in stormlight. A fireplace casting gold across marble floors. The air warm against her chilled skin. She shifted, and something clattered gently beside her. A small bowl. Dante Costa sat next to her, sleeves rolled, hands steady, holding a cloth he had been using to clean the dried blood at her temple. For a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. Dante Costa, the city's most feared man. The monster parents warned their sons not to cross. The man whose name made grown criminals choke. And he was sitting beside her, carefully tending her bruises as if afraid to make them worse. When she startled awake, his eyes snapped up to meet hers, dark, focused, unreadable. "You're awake," he murmured. His voice sounded softer indoors, stripped of thunder but no less commanding. She tried to sit up too fast. Pain lanced through her ribs, and she gasped, folding over instinctively. Dante's hand shot out, firm but gentle, pressing lightly against her shoulder to steady her. "Slow," he said. "You're hurt." She swallowed, blinking back the sting of tears. "I'm fine, really. It's not—" His expression sharpened. "Don't do that." She froze. "Don't minimize it," he continued, voice low but carrying weight that left no room for argument. "Don't pretend what was done to you is small. I've seen small. These," he said, his fingertip hovering near the bruise on her cheek without touching it, "are not small." Her throat tightened. She didn't know why that simple acknowledgement undid her more than the injuries themselves. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Dante exhaled through his nose, something almost frustrated flickering across his features. Not angry at her, angry at the world that taught her apologies were the safest words she could use. "You don't owe me that," he said softly. "None of this is your fault." She looked down at her hands, scraped knuckles, trembling fingers, someone else's fingerprints bruised into her skin. Shame pooled inside her like acid. He dipped the cloth into warm water, wrung it out carefully, and touched it to her cheek. She flinched instinctively. Dante froze. "Does it hurt?" "No," she lied quickly. "I'm just jumpy. Emilia." The way he said her name made her look up despite herself. "You don't have to be afraid of me." She almost laughed, because who in their right mind wouldn't be afraid of Dante Costa? But the strange thing was, she wasn't. Not of him. Not with his hands this gentle. Not with his eyes watching her like she was something fragile he wasn't used to holding. "Thank you," she whispered, voice cracking. His jaw tightened, the muscle ticking. "Don't thank me either." "Why not?" "Because taking care of you is the least I can do," he said, and for the first time since she'd met him, his voice had shadows of something raw in it. "After what you've been through, after you came to me, no, I won't accept gratitude for something I should have done sooner." Her breath hitched. So he'd noticed her before. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed. He set the cloth down, his demeanor shifting from careful to lethal in a blink. "Emilia," he said quietly, "tell me who did this." Her pulse kicked, fear returning like a cruel whisper. I don't protect him." His voice wasn't harsh. It was deadly calm, and that was worse. "I'm not protecting him. She swallowed hard. "I'm protecting myself." Dante leaned closer, hands braced on either side of her hips, but still careful not to touch her. "You came to my gates," he said, every word low and controlled. "You collapsed in front of my car. You were running from someone. Tell me who." She looked down again, tears slipping past her lashes as she whispered, "If I tell you, you'll kill him." Dante didn't blink. Yes. The honesty of it made her shiver. He didn't hide it. He didn't dress it up as justice. He didn't pretend to be a hero. He was a storm dressed in a suit, a devil worshipped out of fear, and he wasn't going to lie to her to make himself seem gentler. But then his fingers brushed her chin, barely a touch, but enough to lift her gaze to his. "But only if that is what you want," he said, softer now, impossibly careful with her fear. "Look at me, Amelia. Do you want him dead?" Her breath trembled. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Dante studied her, something ancient and ruthless darkening his eyes. "Then I'll ask you a different question," he murmured, thumb ghosting along the uninjured side of her face. "Do you want him to never hurt you again?" This time she nodded. Dante's voice dropped to a vow. "Then he won't." The words didn't boom. They didn't shout. They were quiet, cold, unshakable. A promise made by a monster whose hands somehow had never felt so gentle. Amelia's breath hitched as Dante waited, his eyes fixed on her with a stillness that made her stomach twist. He didn't push, didn't raise his voice, didn't force her chin up or demand more than she could give. He simply waited, silent, unblinking, immovable. And somehow that made it harder. Her fingers clenched around the blanket draped over her lap, knuckles white, breath unsteady. She stared past him at the window, rain still streaking down the glass in jagged lines. She could lie. She could pretend she didn't know. She could say it was a stranger, a mugger, anyone else. But Dante would see the lie instantly. He always saw. Her throat tightened. It was... Her voice cracked, barely more than air. It was Marcus. Dante's expression didn't simply change. It shut off. Like someone had flipped a switch inside him, extinguishing the warmth, the concern, the careful gentleness he'd shown her since she woke. His jaw tightened, but not in anger. Something far colder settled into his features. Something lethal, controlled, absolute. "Marcus who?" he asked, voice calm in a way that terrified her. She swallowed. The name tasted like poison on her tongue. "Marcus Hale." Silence swallowed the room whole. Outside thunder rolled. Inside Dante's eyes went flat, black, void of anything human. Not rage, not shock, nothing. But the nothingness was worse. Amelia's heart thudded painfully. She knew that look. Every woman who'd grown up in this city did. Marcus Hale wasn't just violent. He was untouchable. The kind of man cops laughed with at bars, judges owed favors to, bouncers let into VIP rooms because saying no meant trouble. Marcus had connections, a badge in his pocket, a devil's grin, and a violent streak he hid behind charm when he needed to. But Dante belonged to an entirely different world, and she had just placed those worlds on a collision course. Dante rose slowly, like a shadow unfolding. He didn't look away from her, didn't blink, didn't breathe for a long, terrible moment. Then he turned toward the door. "Enzo!" His voice wasn't loud, but it hit like a gunshot. The door opened instantly, as if Enzo had been waiting on the other side. He took one look at Dante's face and paled. "Boss?" Dante didn't hesitate. "Pull everything we have on Marcus Hale." Enzo froze. "Hale. The one with the... all of it," Dante repeated, voice sharp enough to draw blood. "Background, connections, known associates. Every file, every rumor, every debt. I want it in front of me in 10 minutes. Enzo nodded sharply and vanished down the hall. Dante didn't move right away. He stood there, back to her, hands at his sides but stiff. His shoulders rose and fell once, slow, controlled, before he turned back toward her. The void in his eyes had not softened. "Amelia," he said quietly. She braced. "You should understand what you've done." Her breath caught. The blanket felt suddenly too heavy, her heartbeat too loud. I know he's dangerous, she whispered, voice trembling. I know he has people protecting him. I know he— You don't understand, Dante interrupted softly, stepping closer. You didn't just tell me his name. He stopped at the edge of the bed, his presence overwhelming even without touching her. You handed me his death. Her lips parted, breath stuttering. I didn't ask you to kill him. No, Dante agreed. You didn't have to. He crouched in front of her, bringing himself level with her eyes. His gaze wasn't cruel or angry. It was certain, a certainty that shook her more than rage ever could. When someone lays hands on what's mine to protect, he said, voice quiet and steady, I don't let that man keep breathing. Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. Dante's gaze softened only slightly, but it wasn't comfort. It was clarity. You came to my gates, he said. You bled on my doorstep. You collapsed in front of my car. He touched her cheek gently with the back of his fingers. By the rules of the world you stepped into, that makes you mine to avenge. Her pulse pounded. I didn't mean to drag you into this. You didn't drag me, he murmured. You revealed the truth. What truth? That someone hurt a woman under my roof while believing I would do nothing. He stood then, straightening to his full height, the shift in him unmistakable. The softness he'd shown while tending her wounds was gone, replaced by the brutal precision his enemies feared. You shouldn't have told me his name, Dante said quietly. Her heart sank. But thank you for trusting me with it. The room felt colder suddenly, or maybe that was her imagination, because she realized, with a dizzying mix of relief and terror, that she had crossed a line in this penthouse, a line that could never be uncrossed. And Dante Costa didn't erase lines. He redrew them in blood. The words were still echoing in her mind. You handed me his death, when Dante reached for his coat. The shift was subtle, but she felt it like a temperature drop. The man who had cleaned her wounds with gentle hands was gone. In his place stood the man the underworld whispered about in fear. Amelia pushed herself upright, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Dante, wait. He paused, but didn't turn. You're not responsible for me, she said, breath trembling. I don't belong to you. I'm not— His head turned just enough for her to see the dangerous calm in his eyes. Amelia. Her name sounded like a warning. Or a prayer. She couldn't tell. You came to me, he said quietly. That alone makes you mine to protect. I didn't come to you, she argued, voice cracking. I came to a gate. A place with lights. I didn't even know you'd be there. I didn't choose. Dante turned fully then, and the look he gave her silenced the rest of her words. Not cruel, not possessive. Something else, something older. You ran to the one place you thought no one could touch you, he said. Don't pretend it meant nothing. Heat crawled up her neck. Shame, fear, confusion all knotted together. I was desperate, she whispered. I wasn't thinking. He closed the distance between them slowly, stopping at the edge of the bed. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. His presence alone pressed against her like a hand. You don't have to be mine, he murmured, voice low and steady. But your safety is. That distinction, subtle, impossible to untangle, made her chest tighten. Dante, her voice faltered. I never asked you to protect me. And I never asked for permission, he replied. Her breath hitched. He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like a vow that vibrated through the room, thick and unbreakable. No one touches what's mine. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they settled somewhere beneath her ribs, deep and warm and terrifyingly comforting. She tore her gaze away, shaking her head. You can't say things like that. I can, he said simply, and I will. Why? She whispered. Because someone hurt you, Dante unanswered. Because you're alone. Because you showed up with fear in your eyes, and blood on your skin, and didn't think you deserved to be saved. His voice dropped to something almost tender. "And because the thought of you walking out of here unprotected makes me want to burn this city to ash." Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. Dante lifted one hand, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his palm. "You're safe now," he said quietly, "and you will stay safe, with or without your permission." Her throat tightened. "I have an apartment," she whispered. "I have to go back at some point." "No," he said instantly, the words sharp as steel. "You're not going back alone." Before she could argue, Enzo appeared in the doorway, breathless, phone in hand. "Boss, I sent the team to her place like you ordered." Emilia's stomach twisted. "You did what?" Dante didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Enzo, cold and expectant. "And?" Enzo swallowed. "It's bad." Something in her chest cracked. "What does that mean?" Enzo hesitated, glancing at Dante. "Tell her," Dante ordered. "Your apartment's been ransacked," Enzo said gently. "Doors kicked in, drawers dumped, pictures smashed. Whoever it was, they were looking for something." Her breath left her in a sharp, painful exhale. No, 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 not her tiny apartment with its mismatched furniture and thrift store dishes, the only place that had been hers after leaving Marcus. Not the place where she had tried to start over, build a life, feel safe. Dante took a single step toward her. She flinched without meaning to, but he stayed where he was, letting her have that distance. "They were looking for you," he said softly. Her stomach dropped, the room tilted, and Dante's next words were devastating in their certainty. "You're not going back there. Ever." "I don't have anywhere else to go," she whispered. "Yes, you do." Her head snapped up. Dante met her gaze with something fierce and unyielding. "You're staying here," he said. "Under my roof, under my protection." Her breath stuttered. "You can't decide that." "I already have." Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Dante." "You crossed a line tonight," he said, voice softer now but no less final. "Not by telling me his name, by surviving long enough to reach my gates." He stepped closer, slow enough for her to stop him if she wanted. She didn't. "You ran to me, Amelia," he murmured, "and now this city will bow to the vow I made the moment I picked you up off the ground." His hand brushed her hair back, a touch so gentle it made her eyes sting. "No one touches what's mine," he said again, quieter this time. "Not ever again." And for the first time since the night began, she didn't feel like running. Amelia woke to the murmur of unfamiliar voices, low, tense, threaded with something she recognized instantly. Fear. Not hers this time. Theirs. The penthouse was dim, lit only by the faint glow bleeding in from the hallway. She was alone in Dante's massive bed, wrapped in blankets far softer than anything she'd owned. For a moment she lay still, listening. 2 men, maybe 3. Their voices drifted through the cracked door. "He's got half the precinct in his pocket." "And the judge, the one who signs no-knock warrants. Hale's not just dirty, he's protected." Her stomach twisted. Marcus. They were talking about Marcus. Of course they were. She curled her fingers into the sheets, breath catching. She shouldn't have listened. She shouldn't have heard any of this. She didn't belong in this world. This dangerous, whispered world full of men who spoke about violence with the same tone most people used to discuss weather. "And the girl?" one voice asked. Amelia froze, a beat of silence. "She's safer here than anywhere," another replied. "And if Hale's smart, he'll flee the city before Costa gets to him." If Hale's smart, he wasn't. A floorboard creaked in the hall. Heavy footsteps, slow, purposeful. Coming closer. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Panic shot through her like lightning. She shoved back against the headboard, breath coming too fast, chest tightening. She reached blindly for something, anything, that could be used as a weapon. There was nothing. Her pulse roared in her ears as the footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom door. She pressed a hand over her mouth, trying to hold back a sound. fear or a sob, she wasn't sure. The door handle turned, and then the voice she'd somehow begun to trust broke through the storm in her mind. Amelia. Just her name. Low, steady, controlled enough to soothe, but edged enough to remind her he was still the most dangerous man in the building. Dante stepped inside, shutting the door quietly behind him. The panic in her chest loosened immediately, against her will. He crossed the room without hesitation, but slowly, slow enough for her to see each step, to know he wasn't a threat. Her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't hide it. He noticed instantly. Dante reached the edge of the bed and crouched beside it, eyes never leaving hers. Rain still clung to his hair and coat. He'd just come from outside, from working. "Breathe," he said softly. "Look at me." She tried. Her lungs resisted. His hand rose, not touching her yet, and hovered close enough to feel the heat of him. "Amelia," he murmured again. "You're safe. No one is getting through that door unless I want them to." A tear escaped down her cheek. She didn't even feel it fall. Dante's expression flickered, just for a moment, into something almost pained. He moved closer, his hand brushing over hers on the blanket. Not grabbing, not pulling, just resting his palm over her trembling fingers. The weight of it was grounding, heavy, real, warm. She sucked in a shaky breath. Dante exhaled slowly, as though he'd been holding his own breath, waiting for her to look at him. "No one gets to you," he said quietly, words resonating like a vow. "Not while I'm breathing." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But fear had its claws deep in her chest. "I heard them," she whispered. "Your men. They said Marcus has connections. Judges. Police. People who will cover for him." Dante didn't flinch. "I know." "He won't stop," she whispered. "He'll come here. He'll hurt you. Or your men. He'll—" Dante leaned in, pressing a finger gently against her lips, not silencing her out of dominance, silencing her fear. "Amelia," he murmured. "The only person in danger here is Marcus Hale." Her breath stuttered, but Dante wasn't finished. "You think his connections worry me?" he asked, brow lifting. "You think a corrupt cop or a crooked judge can stand between me and a man who hurt what I protect?" His hand slid from her lips to her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "They can't," he said simply. Her chest heaved, emotion swelling into something sharp and overwhelming. "But I don't want anyone dying because of me," she whispered. Dante's gaze softened in a way that made her feel exposed and held at the same time. "You didn't cause this," he said. "He did." His thumb traced the corner of her jaw where the bruise still darkened her skin. "And I will end it." Her heartbeat skipped. He stood slowly, leaving his hand in hers just long enough to steady her breathing again. "Try to rest," he said, voice low. "I'll be outside this door, and my men are covering every entrance." She hesitated. "Dante?" He paused at the doorway. Don't go too far." Something warm flickered across his face, soft, subtle, but unmistakably real. "I'm not leaving this floor," he said. "You couldn't make me if you tried." She exhaled, tension spilling out of her muscles. As the door clicked softly shut, she lay back down, Dante's promise lingering in the air like a shield wrapped around her. "No one gets to you. Not while I'm breathing, for the first time since the nightmare began." She finally believed it. Steam curled around her like a fragile veil as Amelia stepped out of the shower, her legs still unsteady beneath her. She gripped the counter with trembling fingers, breath fogging the mirror. Warm water ran in rivulets down her arms, tracing the bruises blooming there, purple, yellow, angry. Her ribs throbbed beneath the towel wrapped tightly around her chest. She hated mirrors. Tonight, she hated them even more. She stared at the reflection she didn't recognize anymore. A girl who looked small, hurt, hunted. A girl who had fought to survive but had no idea what surviving even meant now. A soft knock sounded at the bathroom door. Then the voice she was beginning to crave in ways she couldn't explain. "Emilia." She turned too fast, ribs screaming in protest. I'm fine. I'll be out in a second." The handle turned despite the protest. Dante stepped in quietly, closing the door behind him. He didn't invade the space. He didn't reach for her. But the instant his eyes found her, really found her, the air changed. His entire body went still. Emilia followed his gaze downward, and only then realized her towel had slipped lower than she intended, dipping beneath her collarbone. Heat flooded her cheeks as she yanked it back up, but she wasn't fast enough. He saw all of it. Every bruise, every handprint, every mark left by someone who claimed to love her. Dante's breathing stopped, not hitched, not stuttered. Stopped. His jaw clenched so hard she heard the faint grind of his teeth. A vein pulsed at his temple, his hands curling slowly, deliberately at his sides, as if he was fighting the urge to put them through a wall or around someone's throat. "Dante," she whispered. He didn't look at her face. Couldn't. His eyes were glued to the map of violence on her skin, chest rising with slow, measured breaths that were far too controlled to be calm. When he finally spoke, his voice was unrecognizable. "Who did this to you?" She swallowed hard. "You already know." "No," he said, stepping closer. "I know a name. I want to know what he did." "I don't... Emilia." Just her name. Low. Dangerous. Almost broken. She backed up a step on instinct, fear not of him, but of the fury radiating from him. He noticed, and his hands shot up immediately, palms outward. "No, not for you," he said, voice cracking at the edges. "Never for you." He took another step closer, slower this time, as if approaching something fragile. She opened her mouth, searching for words, but her breath hitched, and she winced, her ribs tightening painfully as she reached for the sink. Her towel slipped again, and Dante closed the distance in a single, furious breath. Not rough, not forceful. He caught her by the waist before she could fall, hands firm but gentle, placing her upright, securing the towel in one swift motion. His fingers brushed her side, and she flinched. His entire body reacted like he'd been burned. "Here?" he whispered, voice raw. She nodded. His eyes darkened to something volcanic. "You're hurting," he said, more to himself than to her. "And I wasn't there to stop it." "You can't blame yourself," she whispered. "Yes," Dante breathed, stepping closer until his chest brushed her shoulder. "I can." She reached up, hesitant, trembling, and placed a hand over his fist where it rested against the counter. "Dante, I don't want more violence because of me." He looked at her, startled, almost confused by the plea. "You think this is about violence?" he asked quietly. "You think I want blood for sport?" His knuckles brushed her cheek, tracing the faint outline of a bruise she hadn't even seen yet. "I want justice," he murmured. "I want you safe. I want him unable to breathe the same air you breathe." She shook her head desperately. "It'll never end if you go after him." "It already ended," Dante said. "The moment he touched you." She inhaled sharply. "Dante, let me be angry for you," he whispered. Her heart stuttered. His forehead touched hers then. Barely a graze, more breath than contact. It shouldn't have felt intimate. It should have felt terrifying. But it felt like something else. Something anchoring. Something like protection wrapping itself around her ribs. Something like warmth she hadn't felt in a very long time. "This anger," Dante continued, "it isn't mine. It's yours. I'm holding it because you shouldn't have to." Her eyes fluttered shut as he cupped her jaw with trembling gentleness. "Let me be the monster," he murmured, "so you don't have to be afraid anymore." And against every rule she'd lived her life by, she didn't tell him to stop. Dawn arrived like a blade, sharp, cold, merciless. Emilia sat curled in the back seat of Dante's armored car, the engine humming beneath her, the city still wrapped in the dim blue haze that comes just before sunrise. The windows were tinted so dark she could barely see out, but Dante insisted she stay inside, out of sight, out of danger. His men flanked the car in a tight formation, every one of them armed, every one of them watching the shadows like predators waiting for something to move. This wasn't a rescue, this wasn't a warning, this was a hunt. Her stomach twisted. She hadn't asked for this, she hadn't wanted a war. But Dante had moved the moment dawn touched the horizon. Fast, lethal, unstoppable. "Stay inside," he'd told her before disappearing into the early morning darkness. "This ends today." She believed him. That terrified her more than anything. A crackle of static broke the silence. One of Dante's men adjusting his earpiece. "They have eyes on Hale," he murmured. "Warehouse district. Back entrance." Amelia's pulse jumped. She pressed her forehead to the cold window, breath fogging the glass. She couldn't see details, only the silhouettes of Dante's crew moving with purpose across the abandoned lot. They moved like a single organism. No wasted steps, no noise, no hesitation. Dante's doing. She knew he was somewhere out there, leading them, controlling the rhythm of the street like a conductor guiding an orchestra of violence. A sudden shout broke the stillness. "Police! Back off!" Her ex's protectors, the same officers who had looked away while Marcus charmed judges and laughed with his buddies at precinct bars. The same officers who had told her, "Men like him are hard to prosecute. Maybe don't provoke him." Her fingers curled into fists. The car door swung open, not from the outside, but from the driver's seat. Enzo turned to face her. "You should stay down, Amelia." Is Marcus there?" she whispered. Enzo nodded grimly. "And the cops he pays aren't letting him go without a fight." Her breath caught. "Dante, he's fine," Enzo said firmly, "but things are escalating." A flash of movement caught her eye. Then another. Figures darted behind rusted shipping crates. A shout. The metallic click of a gun being racked. The street erupted. It wasn't a chaotic brawl, it wasn't random violence. This was controlled, coordinated. Dante's men advancing with precision, the corrupt officers scrambling to keep up, shouting commands that carried no weight. And through it all, Amelia heard his voice. Not raised, not frantic, cold, commanding. "Take the left flank. Disarm him. Keep him alive. No stray fire, she's watching." She didn't know how she could hear him. Not with everything happening at once, but she did. His voice cut through the chaos, threading its way through the violence like a guiding current. And then she saw him. Dante stepped out from behind a shipping container, coat flaring behind him, expression carved from stone. He moved through the war like he'd been born in it, bullets glancing off the armored metal near him, shouts echoing around him. But he didn't flinch. His gaze swept the yard. Sharp, calculating, lethal. It landed on the police officer dragging Marcus toward the back exit. Dante's eyes went cold, and everything in the yard froze. A single gesture from Dante, barely more than a flick of his hand, sent his men surging forward. Two tackled the corrupt officer. Another grabbed Marcus by the collar, dragging him into the open. Marcus stumbled, screaming, face twisted with fear. He looked nothing like the charming, confident man who once convinced her she was worthless. He looked small, weak, pathetic. But Dante didn't touch him. Not yet. A man shoved Marcus to his knees in the dirt. Amelia's breath hitched. This was real. This was happening because of her. Because Dante had decided her fear was no longer acceptable. Marcus screamed something she couldn't hear, but Dante's reply echoed across the lot. "You put your hands on a woman under my protection." Amelia's heart slammed against her ribs. Dante's men fell silent. Marcus stopped struggling. The whole street seemed to hold its breath. "That," Dante continued, "was your final mistake." Amelia pressed a hand to her mouth, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She didn't want this, but she needed it. Needed to see the man who made her afraid tremble in front of someone stronger. She watched as Dante crouched in front of Marcus, speaking low, too low for her to hear. But whatever he said drained the color from Marcus's face. And then Dante stood, turned, and signaled to his men. "Get him out of my sight!" Marcus was dragged away, screaming, but Dante didn't watch. He was already crossing the lot, already heading back toward her, already done. The war he unleashed fell silent behind him. The moment his hand pressed to the car door, Amelia's breath shattered. He opened it and held out a hand. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said quietly. The city, the fight, the chaos behind him. None of it mattered. Only his voice did. Only his vow. Amelia sat curled in the corner of Dante's office. The walls thick enough to muffle the city, the storm, even the chaos of the morning. But nothing could muffle the sound of her own heartbeat, pulsing hard against her ribs as footsteps echoed somewhere deep in the penthouse. Heavy steps, dragging weight. A choked cry she recognized. Instantly. Marcus. Her breath hitched, terror freezing her bones. Instinct told her to hide, to make herself small, to disappear before he saw her, before he could hurt her again. But Dante had made sure Marcus would never get near her. She heard men speaking in low voices, the scrape of a chair, a muffled curse. And then Dante's voice, quiet, steady, colder than she'd ever heard. "Leave us." Amelia's pulse spiked. No, 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 no. She wanted Dante safe. She wanted Marcus punished. But she didn't want the monster everyone feared to come out because of her. She pushed off the couch, limbs trembling. But before she could move, Enzo blocked her path. "You shouldn't see this," he murmured. Her voice trembled. I'm the reason." "You're the reason he's breathing," Enzo cut in softly. "Only because the boss wants you spared from the worst of it." Her knees weakened. She sank back onto the cushions, hands twisting together, breath shallow. Beyond the walls, Dante's voice dropped into something lethal, too low for her to make out the words, but the tone alone made the hair on her arms rise. Marcus answered with a strangled whimper, then a scream muffled halfway through. Amelia flinched. Enzo didn't move away from the door. He stood guard like a silent sentinel, watching the hallway instead of her. "He won't kill him?" she whispered. Enzo hesitated. "For you. The boss will show restraint." "Restraint. God." Amelia closed her eyes, pressing her palms against them, willing the world to quiet. The room felt too small, too still, too suffocating. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. She couldn't tell. The waiting was its own kind of torture. Then, silence. A door opened. Footsteps. Slow. Controlled. Amelia shot upright. Dante appeared in the doorway, framed by morning light. His coat was off, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled. Blood stained the edge of his knuckles. Dark, drying, unmistakable. But the terrifying part wasn't the blood. It was his eyes. Soft, warm, focused entirely on her. He closed the door behind him, cutting off the sight of the men carrying Marcus's sobbing, broken body out of the room. Dante didn't let her look. He blocked her view with a deliberate step, shielding her even now. "Amelia," he said quietly. Her breath shattered. He crossed the room slowly, as if afraid to frighten her. When he reached her, he knelt, bringing himself eye level with her. Her gaze flicked toward his hands. He followed her stare, then curled his bloody fingers into a loose fist, hiding the stains. "He deserved worse," Dante murmured, voice rough with restrained fury. "But I ended it." She swallowed hard. "Ended?" "He'll never touch you again." His finger brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the gentlest gesture she'd ever felt. "He'll never come near you, never speak your name, never breathe your fear again." Her eyes burned with tears. What did you do?" "I made sure he remembers what he did to you," Dante said, the softness in his gaze warring with the violence lingering in his voice. "And what happens to men who hurt what I protect. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. I didn't want you to become... He cupped her cheek with his uninjured hand, thumb brushing the corner of her eye. I didn't become anything, Dante whispered. I've always been this. He leaned closer, not touching more than her cheek, but close enough that his breath warmed her skin. The only difference now, he murmured, is you're the reason I want to use it for something good. Her breath trembled. He stood slowly, offering his hand. She took it without thinking. He pulled her gently to her feet, his touch warm, steady, grounding. It's done, Dante whispered again, bending his forehead to hers. You're safe. Emotion surged through her so fast she couldn't stop the quiet sound that escaped her. A broken, relieved sob. His arms wrapped around her instantly, pulling her against his chest with a care that contradicted the blood still drying on his skin. He held her while she shook. He held her while she cried. He held her as the dawn finally broke through the windows, painting him in gold. Dante Costa, monster, king, feared ruler of the city, held her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, and whispered one last time, He'll never touch you again. Emilia used to walk through the city like a ghost, head down, careful steps, shoulders curved inward, as if trying to erase herself from the world around her. The kind of girl people overlooked. The kind of girl men like Marcus preyed on. The kind of girl no one bothered to protect. But everything was different now. The first time she stepped outside Dante's penthouse after the incident, she wasn't alone. She felt them before she saw them, shadows shifting behind her, tall figures lingering near street corners, dark coats blending into the edges of the morning fog. Dante's men. They didn't speak to her, didn't walk beside her, didn't acknowledge her at all. They simply existed in parallel with her steps, silent and watchful, their presence as unmistakable as a loaded gun. And people noticed. Storefronts that once ignored her now fell silent the moment she approached. Conversations halted, eyes widened, whispers spread like ripples in water. That's her. The girl he protected. The girl he went to war for. The girl Dante Costa almost burned the city down over. Some people looked at her with envy, others with fear, most with a confused mixture of both. It should have made her uncomfortable, and in the beginning it did. She hated being stared at, hated feeling exposed. But after weeks in the penthouse, weeks wrapped in Dante's orbit, weeks of hearing footsteps behind her that meant safety, not danger, something in her had shifted. She didn't walk like a ghost anymore. She held her head a little higher, breathed a little deeper, moved with a steadiness she didn't know she was capable of. And Dante noticed. He noticed everything. One afternoon, she stopped by a small cafe near downtown, the first place she ever went alone since the night she moved in with him. She could feel one of Dante's guards park himself near a newspaper stand across the street, pretending to read headlines while scanning the crowd every few seconds. She tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach. I'm safe. I'm safe. She repeated the words until they started to feel real. But safety, like everything in Dante's world, came with shadows, which she learned the moment a stranger stepped toward her inside the cafe. He was young, maybe a new hire, maybe someone with more curiosity than sense. His smile was too familiar, his gaze lingering too long on the fading mark near her collarbone, one of the last reminders of Marcus's violence. You're Emilia, right? He asked, leaning closer, as if they were sharing a secret. Everyone's been talking. Before she could respond, the air shifted, changed, hardened. A shadow fell over the man, a presence that swallowed the room whole. Dante Costa stood behind Emilia, silent and predatory, like a storm waiting for permission to break. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. He slipped off his gloves slowly, one finger at a time, his movements precise, controlled. Every diner in the cafe froze. Dante's voice dropped so low the windows seemed to vibrate. Step back, he murmured, each word dragged through gravel. She's under my protection. The stranger backed away instantly, hands raised, face pale. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear, but from something electric and dizzying, something she didn't have a name for yet. Dante didn't look at the man again. His attention was on her. Only her. "You shouldn't be alone here," he said quietly, tucking his gloves into his coat. "People talk. Some want to test boundaries." Her breath trembled. "I can't stay locked away forever." "I'm not locking you away." He leaned closer, voice steady. "I'm keeping you breathing." She swallowed, the truth settling in her bones. Dante Costa didn't save people. He claimed them. Claimed them with his silence, with his presence, with the unspoken promise that anyone who touched what he protected would regret it. Weeks ago, the thought would have suffocated her. Now her knees felt weak for an entirely different reason. When they stepped outside the cafe together, his hand brushed her lower back, guiding her, not forcing her, and the touch sent something warm spiraling through her chest. "You're safe," he said again, softer this time. But the safety he offered wasn't gentle or quiet. It wasn't soft-spoken or clean. It was sharp, lethal. A fortress built out of fire and vengeance. And as she walked beside him, his shadow long against the pavement, she realized something with startling clarity. She didn't want to run anymore. Not from him. Not from the world he ruled. Not from the version of herself she was becoming under his protection. Because for the first time in her life, fear didn't own her. He did. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't mind that at all.